Today, on GovCon M&A Talk, we speak with Christine Williamson, a partner with Cohn Reznick. Christine is one of the authors of the 10th anniversary Gauge Report. This year it's called In It to Win It: How to Outthink, Outbid, and Outlast Other GovCon Companies. The Gauge Report examines real GovCon data to determine what really creates value and the trends that are reshaping GovCon M&A. This is GovCon M&A Talk, presented by Orange Slices. I'm Sharon Heaton of sbLiftOff, and I live and breathe GovCon M&A. So let's talk deals. Hi, Christine. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you for having me once again.
Tell us about the Gauge Report. What is it supposed to be? Let's do this kind of quickly so we can get into the substance of what it is. But why should people be paying attention to the Gauge Report?
Well, right on the front of the Gauge Report, it's an annual industry roadmap of benchmarks and trends. Easy enough, right there. Broken up into 5 chapters that spell out Gauge, G-A-U-G-E. Use it every year. It has a different theme. It is exciting. It's fun. Some of it is the same old that you expect as GovCon. And then there are those, gotcha different items that we find each year. It's just a really good report because there's not that much out there for government contractors. There is in certain areas, but this covers the gamut of information that I think the novice government contractor all the way to the experienced can use the report.
So what size companies are the ones responding to the questions?
So our respondents, and I'll flip to that page, which you'll see when you get the report, and hopefully you'll download it. We break them out by job title. So 51% this year was C-suite that filled it out. So pretty good. I mean, the rest of it, we got accounting, we've got directors, controllers, contract managers, project managers. So it's great. 50% C-level, 50% not. Then we break them up by annual revenue, and about 60% was under 50 million, and the other 40% was above 50 million. So again, our statistics are really good and very relevant because we have enough data to slice and dice by individual revenue and also by full-time equivalent of number of employees. And then we also sometimes break it out if we need to by the NAICS code that the company may file under and receive rewards under as well.
So before we dive into specific things about this year's Gauge Report, what do you think is the overall takeaway from this year's Gauge Report? What should people be looking for and saying, wow, I really got something out of the 10th anniversary of reading the Gauge Report?
Well, this year was a little different for a lot of reasons. It's our 10th anniversary. It's also the year after Doge hit and after the new administration. So we knew the answers were going to be very different this year because of some of the pessimism that we've seen, in the federal government, workers, subcontractors, prime contractors. Things have really, taken a little seismic changes for government contractors. So what we did this year that was interesting, Sharon, is we took the last 9 years and we compiled a lot of average data and compared it to 2026 data. So it's the first year that we really, compiled lots of data and compared it. And so we call that the gauge average. And so there's about 13 or 14 questions that we asked that we were able to do that we ask every single year. We also asked a little bit about what companies felt like with Doge, with the changes. And we tried to spend that to make that positive as a way for companies, to move forward and to move ahead of what all the changes were.
Well, before we go too far there, on page 8 of the Gauge Report, which I have read in great detail, it's very interesting.
Thank you.
I was struck by the confidence rating.
Oh,
where you,
yeah.
you're basically saying, hey, over the past year, how much has your confidence in federal government contracting changed?
hmm
And talk about those results, please.
Yeah, so our confidence rating dropped from compared to somewhat lower to somewhat higher, dropped like 54 points in a rating. So we had 60% of the folks that were much lower or somewhat lower in their confidence with the federal government. And then only higher was, and somewhat higher was 5%. That's a big change from prior years. And we compared how do you feel about your current business environment for government contracting, whether you were pessimistic or optimistic. And you'd see that too on page 8, where our optimism rating for 9 years was 58 points. It dropped down to 3 points in 2026 as people were answering the gauge. And then
So
remember, the answers were in January and February this year, so you've got to put that into context because I think it would change if it was now.
I was literally about to ask that. It feels
hmm
like 2025 was actually two separate years. There
Yeah,
was the January through June, July, and then July through the end of the year. And I think people started off 26 a little confused,
yeah.
not quite sure what was going to be happening. So it sounds like your data was being collected in that January, February. I'm hoping that optimism has gone up a little bit since that time.
I'm hoping so too, and I feel like it. You and I are both out there in the market, and things have settled down. We don't have terminations. We don't have contracts, that are being terminated or stopped. There is delays in procurement, but folks are used to that. But I think what's been exciting is the FAR overhaul, the speed of procurement, and in some areas, the money and defense. I think that those have brought back some of the energy.
Well, looking at, I'm going to say it's page 9. Um, what are the issues that about your company's future that keep you up at night? And the
Yeah. So,
one that seemed by far the most significant was competition, the
yeah.
ability to win contracts. What
hmm
is in the Gauge report that can help people deal with competition or win more contracts? As you said, in it to win it.
Yeah. And that is the theme this year. It's all about winning. And so, what we like to do is have people really take different attributes from the Gauge report and compare their company to those attributes. You can't just take one attribute. That's too binary. So if you take multiple attributes, I think that will really help companies where you're looking at what is my wrap rate, which is in our efficiency chapter. When you look at utilization and you're looking at your full-time equivalents in all of the categories, when you also take a look at our win rates and how much are people winning, based on different sizes. And I think that I'm seeing a lot of companies use it to kind of take a step back and say, how much are we bidding on? What are we focused on, when we're bidding? Are we bidding too wide? Do we need to pull in and bring it a little more in to have some big home runs rather than a lot of singles? So this year, we really wanted people to read, and at the back of each chapter, we give tidbits and best practices on trying to do the best that you can to be competitive and to win.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Because, hey, listen, sbLiftOff is an M&A advisory firm, and winning contracts is an incredibly important element of creating value in your company. I speak with government contractors, and they have different philosophies. Some say, we don't bid unless we think that there's at least a 50 or 70% chance of us winning this. And
Right?
then there's others that say, we spew out our
Yep.
contract proposals left and right. So if we have a win rate of 15%, we're happy because we bid so many things. What does the Gauge report say about which is the better way of doing that kind of bidding process? Is it better to go broad, or is it better to go narrow? Is there some middle ground? What have you learned from the data?
Well, there's a lot about the maturity of the business. One the three items that we really focused on this year, in addition to just how many companies you have, or I'm sorry, how many employees you have, what's your revenue size, but we also focused on AI maturity, your win rate might be, what is your win rate? Is it over 50%? And then your profitability. And if you look at the key takeaways at the beginning of the report, we use those attributes to kind of find some synergies of here's the type of companies that are doing certain things to win and to improve the business, be more innovative, be more efficient, save cost. And then we compared it to, are they winning over 50% of the time? Are they mature in their AI? And what is their profitability? So I would tell folks to use those key takeaways that we have. That's in the very beginning. But also the section on G, which is growth. That's where we talk about capture processes. And one of the questions we ask is, what best describes the degree of discipline regarding your company's capture? And if you look at that, it was about 53% say that they have a consistent capture process. But then there's the only 3% that say they automated their capture process, and another 18% informal, and another 26% that said they're very inconsistent in their capture process. So I think because we're going to see, especially the Department of War, the speed of how the task order is going to come out, the speed of contracts coming out to try to get awarded, you're going to really need to beef up your bid and proposal team to be able to keep up. And I think people are going to have to get more consistent in their capture process and what they're going to bid on.
Interesting. You said that about 3% are automating. I would imagine that when you do
Yep.
next year's gauge report, that number is going to be a lot higher.
Yep. Oh, yeah. I mean, the AI maturity is huge. I mean, it's really increased year over year. We started asking it, of course, in 24, and then we go to 25 and now 26, and the maturity that we're seeing in business development, operations, even in accounting, they're all dramatically changing every year.
There's an element of this that I think a lot of business owners don't understand, which is when you're trying to go to market, obviously the buyer cares a lot about your revenue and your margins and your
Mhm.
backlog, matters a lot.
Right.
And most buyers don't pay a lot of attention to pipeline because
Mm-hmm.
most sellers are incredibly unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you have a consistent process and you've been keeping track of what your win rate is, and you can show that your win rate is above 50%, all of a sudden that pipeline has real value when it comes
Mm-hmm.
time to doing a transfer of a company. So I think that the data that you're giving is completely consistent with how we see buyers looking at companies, where most of the time they just discard that pipeline. But that pipeline could actually be a real value enhancer if you're doing your capture process appropriately. Does that sound right to you?
Well, and I think now with purchasers and acquisitions, I mean, if me personally, if I was going to buy, I have to rely on pipeline. I mean, that has to be one of the hugest areas that you're focusing on because you're focusing on the future. I think there's less and less. Well, it's harder to focus on historicals, right? So pipeline is so important.
Pipeline is critically important, and being able to validate it. We get information from sellers, and sometimes it's, hey, listen, we've got a 30% win rate here and a 50% there and a 90% there. And then we see others where it's everything's 80% and above in their P-win. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
How
that
can
has
that
no
be?
credibility. So it just kind of gets pushed aside.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
so
yes.
understanding how that process works and having a repeatable process, I think, is actually something that buyers are paying more attention to now than they have in the past.
Yes, I agree. I agree. So, and look at the back of each chapter, and we have items to help you out, and we go across the business line. We talk about forecasting like a winner. So, forecasting, is real important on page 32. If you take a look at that, we asked about how much do you forecast your pipeline? How much do you forecast your labor resources? How do you forecast your project cost? your indirect rates, your backlog, your cash flow. And look at that. When you talked about that, how important, you see the axle, the importance of pipeline, how high it is, and look how accurate it's not. So importance and accuracy are key to that. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I didn't expect to talk about that.
Well, I wanted to go next to the G, the big G for growth.
Okay. Yes, the big
And
G.
one of the things I found very
Not fun.
interesting was I'm looking at page 10.
Okay.
Compared to those with lower win rates, firms with win rates above 50% were 15% less likely to be affected by government procurement slowdowns.
The slowdown.
And 3 times more likely to rate themselves at CMMC level 3, which is pretty high. I don't speak a lot of that. They are less worried about budget and funding constraints. And then I got to a question of realism, where 24% thought that they were likely to expect EBITDA multiples of 11 times or greater.
Yeah.
Now, let me stop here for an M&A purpose here. If you are in the full,
like that one.
Exactly. If you're in the full and open market and you're doing a defense tech, that 11% makes perfect sense. If you're, whether it's software, hardware, doesn't really matter. If you're doing any kind of typical services, and God forbid you've got, any set-asides, that 11 times multiple is pretty aspirational. What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the full question is on page 31. And this is a new question this year, Sharon, and I knew you'd pick it up. But it says, if your company was sold today, about what EBITDA multiple do you think it would receive? So all the companies said 6.7 was their average. Still might be a little high. 15% of the respondents said between 11 to 15 times. And then 1% said more than 15. So and then we broke that down into anyone that won more than 50%, they said they were going to expect 11 times. So it's just like anything. What I think my company is worth is totally different from what you think my company is worth. But but it's my baby. It's my life. It's what I've spent on, and those pipelines are high. The dreams are high. So it was a new question purposefully to kind of just see what people do think about multiples. And what we always focus on, that shiny object, that multiple that was crazy. And that's the one we talk about. But then on average, how much are we really looking at now, Sharon? 4, 5, maybe 6?
When people ask me what's the right multiple, I have to give them the terrible answer of it depends.
Yeah.
It depends upon a lot of factors. But as a general rule, people overestimate what that multiple is going to be. If the average company is a 5, then I'm clearly a 7. And it's like, well, it doesn't quite work like that. So I want to emphasize that the information that you're pointing out is what the market thinks, but those are sellers think. That's not buyers and sellers. So I think that there's a bit of unrealism associated with some of those numbers. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, yeah. And so many factors that go into it, right? How much you subcontract, what type of contract it is, right? What agency it is. There's just so many factors, and small business that are going to change that multiple. So I hope that does create a buzz and some discussion, especially as we see what I hear the acquisition is going to be, it's going to really build up and be heavier the end of this year and into next year. So it'll be.
I think that's fair.
Yes.
One of the things that I thought was interesting was the average net profit margin. As again, for M&A purposes, we basically say 10%. Are you meeting the 10% threshold? Are you getting 10% or better? That's great. Under 10%, people start looking a little askance.
Mm-hmm.
But your average, both for Gage overall as well as for this particular year, was basically 7.6,
Yes.
7.6, 7.7. So you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing that as kind of the average net profit margin,
Right.
materially below 10.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really, taking all companies into, the fixed price heavy companies, the T&M, the cost plus. If you look, 47% were 10 to 24%. And then it's only 3% saw something, crazy, above 25%. So, um, I think that as long as I've been auditing and seeing companies, I mean, you see the teens with a lot of companies that are doing fixed price and that are efficient. If you have a lot of cost plus, I mean, you're going to have 6 to 8%, depending on what that is. And then the T&Ms, I mean, I feel like rates have somewhat come down. They were high on the GSA schedule early on when GSA schedule came out. But I mean, this is where we see a lot of financial statements, and this is after, almost everything. This isn't EBITDA. This is, after your depreciation, your amortization, your interest. A lot of these companies don't have tax because they're probably passed through, S
They're S
corporations.
corps.
Yeah. So
You
I was
also,
really glad to see that because in 23 and 24 and 25, these profit margins were down. So
oh,
some of this increase in the average was from those previous years before COVID.
interesting, very interesting. You also had something about the readiness rating for companies. And
Yep.
again, sbLiftOff, we're an M&A advisory firm. For us, readiness is, are you ready to go to market?
Right.
And
Okay.
it struck me that the readiness rating that you were giving about, if you were faced with an unexpected audit or there
Yes.
was something came up, for us, it's you're faced with somebody coming in and saying, I'm interested in your company. How
Hmm.
ready is your company? What are the factors that you look at to determine readiness?
Well, I did think that a lot of companies, it was a little bullish in this, because, the readiness rating was 76%. If your company was faced with an unexpected major audit or a review tomorrow, how confident would you be that your systems and your data would stand up without a scramble? So I think the way we should look at that, Sharon, is there's a lot of good accounting systems out there now. The AI maturity is up. So I think you have so much less people on QuickBooks, and that the systems, the ERP systems, the pricing has come down, and companies have realized how important those are. In addition to the business systems, which are internal controls, around your accounting, your estimating, and your purchasing, and then procure EVMS and property and material management. Those are at the bottom of that. But I think it's because a lot of companies care about compliance. So I think they answered it that way. Now, would they be ready for an acquisition? Maybe that rating would come down because, as we know, people, they need a lot of time to get ready for that. So
You know,
hopefully that helps that answer with that question.
absolutely. It's very common for us to have a seller who says our financials are so clean. Whoever's
Mm-hmm.
been working on them is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
We're audited, and we look at them and say, "Oh my God." So there's usually a disconnect. Not always. Sometimes we get financials are like, "We love these. This is fantastic," but
Right.
very often they require a bit of work.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And sometimes that's why they make so much profit because they really aren't spending as much time on the compliance and the accounting.
Um, Before we close, I really want to focus on the growth key takeaways for 2026.
Okay.
Um, you know, One of the things was confidence in federal government, federal contracting has declined.
Yes.
Okay, but one thing that I want to say is that we are being approached by more buyers than we
Mm-hmm.
know what to do with. Having a seller with a really good company that's ready to bring to market. It's not as though it's a seller's market, but if you have an A company, it's a seller's market. If you've got a B company, maybe not so much. So that confidence in federal contracting feels like a mixed message because, yes, everybody got kicked in the teeth and 2025 was a bad year. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm stunned by how many buyers are looking to get in. What have you
Yeah.
been seeing?
No, I've been seeing the same thing, and I mean, it's more on defense, of course. I think now because of they're called non-traditional contractors, that's the key term now. And if you look in the FAR, there's some exemption for them on some of this compliance. I think they actually also see, well, the government is going to start purchasing commercially, and I can sell commercial. I can prove commerciality. I've been selling commercial. So I think there's a different mindset that the the companies that didn't want to do business with the federal government, now they want to jump in and they want to help the federal government be more efficient and be more innovative. And maybe that is a little bit because of Doge. That is a little bit of what they did. So now I think the doors kind of opened up to these more possibly just companies that think a different way. And so maybe we did. It seemed like it was a barrier for a lot of those non-traditionals to come in before. I think the change overall, I think everyone that I'm seeing, believes that now that we've been through this roller coaster ride, we can see, some calmness and some steadiness in the contracting again. So I'm glad to see the non-traditionals join in, if it helps us, if it helps us all, that's what we need.
Well, we need to be thinking about it from a government contracting perspective as well as American citizens and taxpayers.
Exactly.
So, there's multiple perspectives of be looking at this. And one final thing before we close down. One of the things that struck me was you said on average, 42% of pipeline opportunities come from teaming partners. That was really very surprising to me that 42%, nearly 50% of new opportunities in the pipeline are coming from teaming partners. Could you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, so we like to ask some different questions, and this was another new one. And we thought it was important in the growth section, in the winning section, what's important to winning. And so this was key. This was another key question just to find out the same thing about what degree of discipline do you have on your capture process, what portion of that pipeline came from your teaming partners, and is really about almost 40% that said, 51% or more came from their teaming partners, just like you just read. 2 out of 5 credit that. So, I mean, I think we all know we've got to team up. We've got to bring the best product, the best service, the best software to the federal government. And so you see more companies teaming or, doing partner relationships because I think, the bigger IDIQ contracts, I mean, we've all heard it. You need to be on different teams. You need to have different partners. You're not always going to win, but there's a way possibly that you'll be able to get on the contract otherwise. So I think that's why, that's really important.
So, having just released the Gage report, the 10th anniversary Gage report,
Mhm.
congratulations, by the
Thank
way.
you. Thank you.
Um, what is the takeaway that you want business owners to have from this year's Gage report?
So again, what we hear year over year is that folks will use this throughout the year at different management meetings, different business segments, different ways of doing business, and or teaching their folks to be better and understand government contracting. So we hope that folks will use it like they have in the past, where the theme and some of the tips and tricks and our checklist help them. But also, make sure that as you're working on your budget, I hate to talk about budgeting, it's only the end of June, but it's going to be coming up. That when you start to work on your budget, that you open up the gauge, and look at do we need to change our indirect rate structure to be more competitive? I see a lot of companies doing that. Do we need to look at the basis of our indirect rates? Do we need to look back at the number of people we have in different areas of the business? And then just, what are we doing to improve our overall profitability? So there's lots of just information. It's about 60 pages, and I don't think you can take it all in one time, but break it up. Give it to your different parts of your management team. Give one management team one section versus another, and see how that helps with your strategy going forward, your budgeting, and that operational efficiency that we all have to think about to create that profit.
And speaking of efficiency, my understanding is the Gauge report is available for free on the Cohn Resnick website. Is that correct?
Yep. On the Cohn Reznick website, my partner in crime also on Uninet. It's on their website as well. And we continue to do special classes, follow on LinkedIn. We're going to break down each chapter even more. And yes, it did just come out just a couple weeks ago.
Fantastic. Christine, thank you so much for joining us today. I
Thank you.
really appreciate the work that you do on the Gauge report. Congratulations on the 10th anniversary of it. In fact, I think you just won a Davies Award, which
Yes.
is for the putting together of these reports.
Right.
Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yep, we're loving it. This year was fun, Sharon. I don't know why, but it was a lot of fun. I think it was because it was the 10th year, so we really appreciate all the support.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.